you this is going to be big. So let's welcome Don Corrick.
But it's great to be here in Houston. I worked in Midland. That was when I fell in love with the park. Working for George W. Bush, as Charles mentioned when he was at Arbusto. But my changing careers has led to living in Big Bend, which works great for me. My talk tonight, I plan to start by an orientation to the park, and then talking a little bit about kind of a thumbnail sketch of the geological story that we tell in the park and the way that we tell it with our brand new fossil exhibit. Then we'll look at some excavations of fossils in the park, and kind of wrap up with a handful of what I think are really interesting or important topics about the fossil history of the park. So Big Bend has a world-class fossil history. The park itself, there are over 400 different park units in our country now, and Texas has about 14 of those. Everything from historic sites, national seashores, Wild and Scenic River, which actually is managed by Big Bend. But the two big parks that are kind of what people think of with national parks, the big wilderness scenery, are out in western Texas. Guadalupe Mountains up here on the border with New Mexico, and then of course the Big Bend down here in the Big Bend of the Rio Grande, where the river's actually making a detour to get around a big mountain range down here in Mexico, and then gets back on track to come down to the Gulf. The Rio Grande Wild and Scenic River is along the banks of the Rio Grande. It starts at this point, the southernmost point of the bend, and extends way downstream to Lake Amistad. The park itself is 801,000 acres, which is about 1,200 square miles. Geographically, we have a big volcanic mountain range in the center of the park, a big mountain range of limestone, uplifted limestone as part of the Laramide orogeny, the same forces that built the Rocky Mountains, and then a nice mesa on the west side. And so we like to say it's three parks in one: the mountains, the desert, and the river. So lots of recreational opportunities there. The river has got three deep canyons within the park, one down here, Mariscal, and then the Boquillas Canyon up here, and then other canyons continue off the map down into the lower canyons. So kind of a few photos of the park, leaning on mountains, because geologists tend to love mountains. These are the Chisos volcanic origin mountains in the center of the park. Those of you who've been up to the basin, it's a developed area right up here, campground, hotel, and restaurant. An extensive trail system starts there. Some of the volcanic activity that this shot shows that's really nice, kind of the bundt cake effect of these big lava domes that probably is from a highly siliceous magma welling up in a big fissure, a big crack in that big semicircular feature, and that gooey magma creating lava domes, kind of a string of lava domes. The window would be over here, so when you're in the basin, you could see out through that crack. Emery Peak, the high point of the park, is right there. It's about 7,800 feet, so 1.5 miles high. And those of you who have hiked the South Rim, this is the South Rim in this shot. Pine Canyon is back here. It's interpreted as a big caldera over on that side of the mountains. If we fly in a little closer, kind of zoom in, now we have Emery Peak up on the upper right. And the Pinnacles Trail, those of you who have hiked it, comes up through here where these beautiful eroded pinnacles, these are pyroclastic flows that have erupted probably out of Emery Peak's vent. And they get sculpted by erosion into these gorgeous pinnacles. And you can see these high mountains are forested, so a completely different habitat than we find down in the desert. Flying around to the other side of Emery Peak, those of you who hiked the Pinnacles Trail came over this pass right here, and then there's a trail that swoops up into this canyon. This is Boot Canyon. In fact, this pinnacle right here is shaped like an upside-down cowboy boot, which gives it its name. It's one of the big landmarks as you hike that trail. It's on the other side of the canyon, but we have lots of backpacking campsites up here. This is the part of the park that the bears really like to roam in, so it's an exciting place to go. And Emery Peak is up on top of the dome up here, and the trail leads up to that too. It gives spectacular views. Those of you who've hiked the South Rim Trail, which is iconic trail in Big Bend, we're up, there's a trail that kind of wanders in and out of the woods up along the top of this cliff. This is a big stack of pyroclastic flows, sort of like lava, but to the non-geologists, but all the junk that comes out of a volcano, hot ash and droplets of molten magma pile up into these flows. So we see a series of flows stacking up to create the cliffs of the South Rim. And then kind of behind us in this picture, there are views all the way down into Mexico. You can see, I think, 60 miles on a clear day. So those were the volcanic mountains. If we go over to the Sierra del Carmen's in the eastern part of the park, these are mountains made out of limestone, buckled up by the forces of the Laramide orogeny. And even though these in the foreground look horizontal, if you look in the background, you can see perhaps the tilt of the dip of the beds. These are big, tilted, mountainous blocks of limestone, bounded by a fault on one side and sort of stair-stepping across the mountain range. This is kind of the backside of Sioux Peaks, for those of you who know your geography in Big Bend. The desert is beautiful too. Here we have a really nice view of Apache Canyon. And the first half of my career at Big Bend was not in geology, it was as an archaeologist. And so, of course, studying human history of the area. And this is an area that requires about a 12-mile round-trip hike to get in here, but you can see the payoff is spectacular with these colorful canyons. And right up here in the center, this is an outcrop of a rock that the American Indians used to make stone tools. It's a form of quartz called chalcedony, and very colorful, very beautiful material, and just perfect for making stone tools. So surrounding this outcrop is just acres and acres of the debitage, the material that's left behind when you chip rock into stone tools. But I love it for its scenic beauty as well. And this is a National Register archaeological district, so it's been recognized as being nationally important. More just desert beauty. Those are the Chisos in the background, an area, just some hoodoos, or interesting erosional remnants of Cenozoic sandstones. Now, the river, kind of the third part at Big Bend, the water along provided by the Rio Grande creates a ribbon of green stretching through the desert. This is looking downstream on the Rio Grande, so that's Texas on the left and Mexico on the right. Just a complete change from the desert, but you move maybe a quarter mile away from the river and you're back in desert again. So it is a very narrow ribbon of green. And this is Santa Elena Canyon. I fell in love with the park taking river trips through this canyon, and it's another iconic experience to have in Big Bend. We have river guides that will take you in canoes, and spending the night on the river trip and then floating through the canyon the next day is just magical. There's also a nature trail that'll take you about a mile into the canyon, which is really nice, but I highly recommend a river trip. Now, national park units of the 400 in our country, we all like to have a superlative. We want to be the oldest, or the biggest in something, or the best, or the most. And at Big Bend, some of our, I call them bragging rights, because it's Texas, of course. So we have more species of birds than any other unit in the national park system. We have more species of bats than any unit in the system. We have more species of cactus than any other national park. And this points up the tremendous diversity of habitats we have for all these places for these different plants and animals to live. And that's all based on the diversity of the geology in the park. We've already kind of seen we have sedimentary rocks, we have igneous rocks. Our sedimentary rocks are both marine and continental. We even have some metamorphic rocks where the igneous rocks cooked the sedimentary rocks. So we also have within those rocks a spectacular fossil record. And so talking a little bit about the significance of our fossil record. The diversity of our fossil record puts us in the top tier of national park units. So far, we already know of over 1,200 different species of fossils. Again, diversity. We have the reptiles of dinosaurs, swimming reptiles, the mosasaurs, the flying reptiles, tremendous crocodilians, turtles, many kinds of mammals, many kinds of plants, and many kinds of marine creatures. In the lower part of this slide is a beast called Alamosaurus, and we'll be hearing quite a bit about it later in the talk. And this is an excavation of the park on the right of just the neck bones of this animal. And we'll see a little bit more about that later. Continuing the significance of our fossils are animals that are found nowhere else in the world. Our biggest bragging right, our most famous fossil is Koalas, the world's largest known flying creature of all time. And so this hangs in the halls of museums, the fossil halls of museums all over the world. There are 3 in this building. The 3 big pterosaurs in the Hall of Fossils here in this museum are all replicas of Koalas, the Big Bend giant pterosaur. We also are pretty famous, and I get very excited about this. This is we're the only park that I know of that has beds exposed of the KT boundary, or now we call it the KPG boundary. These are beds that were laid down before, during, and after the extinction of the dinosaurs. So the big extinction episode at the end of the Cretaceous that wiped out 3/4 of life on Earth is reflected in our beds, and we're quite close to the Yucatan, where the meteor is presumed to have impacted. And so we have current research working on those beds and appears to show that we have tsunami deposits from that meteor impact sweeping across the Gulf and hitting us. Geographically, we're the closest land or continental environment that got hit by that tsunami. So very important. And so a big landmark as you drive down Tornillo Flat are the Black Peaks. You can see them out to the east of the road you drive in on the park. They sit out there a couple of miles. You can see it from our new fossil exhibit too. And so the beds around the Black Peaks are volcanoes, but the beds around the Black Peaks are the ones that were laid down during this very significant extinction episode. And then lastly, on my little list there, we preserve a really thick slice of geologic time, and that allows us to tell a story. So it wouldn't be geology if we didn't have a geologic time scale here. And you'll notice I've left off about 250 million years of the Paleozoic, but the last 250 million years, if we look at the national parks and the span that they cover, then these are the parks that have significant vertebrate fossils. Then we see they cover a variety of slices of time, but Big Bend covers the biggest slice. Roughly 130 million years, almost complete record of that time. And so that allows us to tell a story of what's going on. We can talk about changing environments over this long span of time, as compared with a place like fluorescent fossil beds, which has exquisite fossils. Butterflies are preserved in some of their beds, as well as vertebrates, but it's basically one environment, so there's not that wonderful story to tell. And this is a little misleading because the scale is not the time scale is not to scale, and the Cretaceous is about half of it. So that's 65 million years of the Cretaceous, and then that's 65 million years after the Cretaceous. And so this is the big extinction where we see the dinosaurs. We have to say goodbye to them. And the Cretaceous always fascinated me. I went to Baylor and sort of lots of outcrops around that. And but it strikes me as being kind of the beginning of our modern world for a lot of reasons. Now, obviously, the wildlife is pretty different in this image from what we have today, but the Cretaceous is the time where we're kind of setting up our modern world. We have flowering plants evolve in the Cretaceous. Along with them, we get pollinating insects, so bees and butterflies evolve in the Cretaceous. The grasses evolve in the Cretaceous, so obviously grazing animals start up as the grasses come in. We do have, so down here in the lower part of the screen, we have some flowering plants depicted here. And note down here, we've got a couple of mammals. So mammals are around. They're waiting in the wings to flourish after the monsters get wiped out. Globally, the world is starting to look like what we might recognize if we were visitors from outer space. The continents are kind of moving into, most of them are moving into a position we would recognize. Africa is splitting off from South America, and the South Atlantic Ocean is developing. So there's a lot going on in the Cretaceous. But there's one big difference when you look at North America, and that's the Seaway. There's a big shallow trough running across our continent, and it creates what we call the Western Interior Seaway. And so, and our story kind of revolves around Big Bend's position relative to the Seaway and what goes on with the Seaway during the 130 million years of geologic time. So we start with the marine section where Big Bend, as well as most of central Texas, is underwater. This is why we have so much limestone in central Texas. The Seaway was here. Mosasaurs are found in Kansas because they're up under the Seaway. Over time, the Seaway is shrinking, and Big Bend finds itself right on the coastline of that Seaway. So we have a swampy habitat with dinosaurs and giant alligators roaming the swamps, very much like the coast of Texas today. As time continues, the Seaway is starting to close up, and Big Bend finds itself a few hundred miles inland in an inland floodplain crossed by rivers and forests with a different set of dinosaurs, different set of wildlife. This is the time where we had the big pterosaurs. We have the big long-necked dinosaur, Alamosaurus is from that time period. Dinosaurs go extinct after this time, and then North America is really looking more like what we're used to, and that sort of reflects the time when the mammals flourished and when Big Bend had its volcanic activity. So these are, if you will, the 4 chapters of the story that we tell in the park using our fossils. So let's run through them again and see some of the animals from Big Bend's fossil record. In the upper left is sort of a depiction, a modern example of the ancient environment. During this time, we had both sharks as well as the bony fishes, like Xiphactinus up there in the upper right. Lower left, we have mosasaurs, the big swimming reptiles. There are some spectacular specimens here in the museum that I got to see today. And then lots of invertebrates as well. We have giant clams, tremendous diversity of ammonites, the animals off on the right there, and a tremendous number of fossils from the marine. Chapter 2, the Seaway starts to close up and Big Bend finds itself in a swampy zone, much like Louisiana or Texas. Giant crocodilians, a variety of dinosaurs. This lower left is Chasmosaurus. That's probably the finest dinosaur skull found in the park, is this one we're seeing right here, a herding animal. And then relatively small tyrannosaurs, as like Teratophonius depicted over there on the right. Time passes, and Big Bend finds itself in an inland floodplain. And it's kind of interesting that the dinosaurs got bigger towards the end of the Cretaceous, and so we see a much larger horned dinosaur. This is Bravoceratops, and we'll see it a little later in the talk as well. This is where we have Quetzalcoatlus, the giant pterosaur. And then depicted in the lower right is, that's a T-Rex skull. And in the park, we know we have a cousin of T-Rex, probably a southern cousin, because T-Rex is a northern species. And finding tyrannosaur fossils is much harder. The predators are more rare in life, and so they don't get fossilized as often as things like the horned dinosaurs or the duck-billed dinosaurs. And so, but we found a vertebrae, and from its position in the spine, we know that we have a tyrannosaur as big as the biggest T-Rex ever found, which is Sue, you may have heard of. And so, because we don't have a skull, we used a T-Rex skull to depict our giant tyrannosaur from the end of the Cretaceous. Then dinosaurs go extinct and usher in the age of mammals. And here's a few samples of those. The saber-toothed cats. We have the dawn horse. It's not depicted here. The lower right is a very strange animal, a brontothere. There's a nice one in this museum here. Kind of like a big, it's not related to a rhinoceros, but it's sort of that size and kind of the big dog on the block. This small skull on the lower left is Meniscoessus, and this is actually an animal that was around in the Cretaceous. Again, this is the time when we had volcanoes in the Big Bend. The major volcanic activity in the Big Bend started about 42 million years ago and wound up about 17 million years ago. So it's pretty well after the dinosaurs went extinct. And so we tell that story, and this is our brand new exhibit. It just opened this year in January, so next trip to the park, you've got to stop and see this. It's on the road in from Marathon, the north entrance to the park. It's about 8 miles north of the main headquarters. So if you've ever stopped at the old fossil bone exhibit, it's at that site. If you stopped at the fossil bone exhibit, the old exhibit that was there, you probably only did it once because it was not that exciting. But we used that location to build a new exhibit that has been very well received. We're very pleased with how it turned out. And so I don't have time to go through the whole exhibit with you, but I want to give you a taste of it. So we tell our story, with 4 exhibits within this, the 4 chapters of our story, and in each one of those, we have these elements that sort of repeat. They change, but the layout is the same. So on the far left, we show the Western Interior Seaway with a nice map of the U.S. So if you're from Kansas or whatever, you can find your spot and kind of follow along of where you were. A photo of the outcrop and a block diagram. Then a nice picture of a modern example of the ancient environment. And then these beautiful big murals done by the same artist that did many of the murals here in this museum, Julius Chutney, showing the ancient scene, kind of putting meat on the bones and showing animals interacting. And then in front of that, we kind of had a showpiece fossil. This is Iphacanus, that big scary fish, sort of like a tarpon today. And then not in this photo is another big case of fossils. So in the marine section, we have a couple of mosasaur skulls, a bunch of ammonites and shark's teeth, and a giant clam and other things. And so as you go through time in this exhibit, you'll see specimens from Big Bend's fossil record and see the changing environments as you go through time. And then in the center of this building, we have a nice big open space, and I love this room. It's a nice place to hang out. There's rock walls you can sit on. There's benches that aren't really in the photo. We finally have overhead Quetzalcoatlus in the park where it was found. So it was found in 1971, and all that time it's been displayed all over the world, but not in the place where it was found. And we interpret fossil wood here. And then we also have these beautiful bronze skulls, the T-Rex here. They're made of bronze, so that we want to bring some things out from behind the glass so people could touch them and look at them up close, interact with them. And another nice mural, you saw that at the beginning of the slide. And then, not really seen here, but kind of behind where I am taking the picture, is a beautiful big open wall with a view to the east with the Del Carmen's in the distance and the KT boundary visible off there about 2 miles away. So it's just a really nice room. And so this It's not a really good angle to look at this bronze, so let's look at it next. So this has turned out to be really a popular feature. There's probably 1,000 photos on Facebook with kids with their heads stuck in the mouth of this thing. And these are cast, and they're accurate in every detail. They're cast from the original. In the exhibit, most everything is a museum quality replica. We're not putting any real specimens that have scientific importance at risk here. But this is just a wonderful specimen. And the whole exhibit was made possible by our friends group, the Big Bend Conservancy, which raised over $1 million for this. And we have some people from the friends group. And it frankly would not have been possible without their support. And it's been a labor of love for the past 5 years to make this a reality. Leaving here, you can kind of see some of that view to the east of the Del Carmen Mountains. And this central room is just a nice shady spot to spend some time. The exhibit is self-guided. You go through at your own pace, as quickly reading the headlines, or as slowly reading every word as you care to. It's sustainable design. We don't have to paint it. It will develop a rusty patina that kind of helps it blend into the desert environment. We've hidden it behind a ridge so you don't really see it from the road until you're right there at the turnoff. It's off the utility grid. We generate our own solar power. We catch water off the roof. So it's a very nice addition to the park. So geologists get into this business because they like being outdoors. At least that was the case for me. I like going camping and tromping around, and paleontologists especially dig in the dirt. So this is actually another view of the KT boundary. This is on the west side of the park, so if you drive in from Terlingua, there's kind of a belt of badlands between the park sign and the first booth you come to where we take your money. And so the KT boundary is right out here in these badlands. These purple stripes are ancient soil horizons, paleosols. It's beautiful in its own right, but think as you drive down that road, you're crossing this major important point in time. And as you hike in the park, you might trip over dinosaur bones. There are certainly still dinosaur bones and petrified logs lying out there in the desert. We don't collect everything we find. You have to have a scientific reason to collect it. And you have to get a permit from the park. And so that I think of the park as a museum without the glass or the velvet ropes or anything. You can go out there and interact with things, enjoy them, pick them up. You can't pick up a dinosaur bone generally, but if you find an arrowhead or something, you can pick it up and look at it, but you should always put it back where you found it. Everything, even when it's collected under a scientific permit, the fossils still belong to the American public. When they're on loan to a museum, we keep track of that. They're just on loan. They still belong to all of us. But you can see kind of that upper left photo, once a bone gets exposed on the surface, sometimes they really start falling apart quickly. The shot where down here in the lower left, where I'm standing there looking at a hadrosaur, a duck-billed dinosaur, is from the angle of the photo, it's kind of hard to see, but this is right on the very edge of a steep drop-off, and this gully running down is just full of dinosaur bones that are eroding out of this deposit and going down. So we need to determine, is there scientific significance to this? Is there something we really need to collect? Or do we just let it turn into sand and gravel as part of nature? And if you're hiking, maybe you'll come across something like this. The upper right, that's actually a tyrannosaur leg bone. So that's a pretty rare find. That's one that ended up getting collected. And then the lower right, that's a conifer log. We have a tremendous amount of petrified wood in the park, as well as animal fossils. Here, these guys working under permit have found a fossil that needs to be collected. So you see some of the tools of the trade, the toilet paper there on the left. That's not just for their comfort, but that's actually used in the excavation. You wet the toilet paper and you put it on the fossil, and then you cover that with a plaster cast, just like a cast that would go in a broken arm. And the toilet paper keeps the plaster from sticking to the fossil. And here down the lower part of the photo, you see his notebooks and his reference materials. And they have to carry their own water out there because they're in the middle of the desert. But it's pretty hard work. This is the Alamosaurus dig. Remember that big long-necked sauropod, the plant eater that looks sort of like Diplodocus or Apatosaurus or Brontosaurus? The one species we have from the very late Cretaceous is Alamosaurus. And of all the bones that have been found of Alamosaurus, this portion of the neck had not been found before until a young woman named Daisuke was out at the geology school group. And during her lunch break, instead of sitting around and chit-chatting, she went walking, and she found the end of this string of vertebrae coming out of the side of a hill. So she was with UT Dallas at that time. And so they came back to us and got another permit to excavate this. And these fossils are now on display at the Perot in Dallas. You see they're using the same technique as the previous guys did, but on a much larger scale. Of course, these aren't bones anymore. They're really a rock. They've been replaced by minerals, so they're very heavy. Each one of these weighed over 1,000 pounds. And so once they excavated them, getting them out was quite a challenge because much of the park is wilderness, and we're not going to let you drive a truck out there and pick up your bones. And not to mention this was several miles across soft dirt. And so they talked to Mel Helicopter, which was located in Dallas. And you see on the right the transport of some of these fossils. The Bell, so that's a Huey. You may have heard of the Huey helicopters. So Bell has built one with a souped-up engine called a Super Huey. And they've all built two models, actually two helicopters total, that have an even bigger engine they call a Super Duper Huey. And this is a Super Duper Huey. They use it to lift up church steeples and air conditioning units and put them on top of buildings. And their chief pilot came out and flew out our bones and didn't have to drop any of them. We got them all out safely. But you can see if you don't have a helicopter, you use manpower. The men on the top photo are taking out one of those big alligator skulls. And then this, in the lower left, I think that's a leg bone. So it's hard work. And then you can get very inventive. So this was a big thigh bone of an Alamosaurus, probably 5 or 6 feet long. And this ranger, a woman ranger on the horse, had the bright idea of, well, we've got an old ruined canoe. Let's roll the bone into that and use the horse to drag it out. And so very ingenious. She was a geologist before she became a ranger. So really using her brains on that one. And so this is in keeping with wilderness rules because we're not using motors or mechanical devices. We're doing it kind of the old-fashioned way. And I like this picture also because it's a really nice view of dinosaur bone country where you have the sandstones and mudstones where you might find dinosaur bones. And off in the distance, that big cliff, most of that's over in Mexico, but that cliff extends up into Texas. And there's a big fault, I think it's 2,000 feet of throw on that fault, the Terlingua Fault, right in there, this uplifted limestone. Now the hard work comes. We've gotten the fossils out of the field and we're working on them in the lab. So this is really tedious, takes years sometimes to get the rocky crust off of the fossils. There on the right is what I refer to as the best skull found in the park so far. That's Chasmosaurus, or we now call it a Guhaceratops. And then on the upper left, he's working on some of those vertebrae that they took out of the Alamosaurus, and it took them years to get those prepared. Then the fossils get studied, scientific papers get written on them, and then eventually they're put on display. So this is what it looks like at Perot. The Perot Museum in Dallas has the only mounted Alamosaurus anywhere in the world. This is a huge animal, about 90 feet long. And you go up onto a balcony here in order to see his face. If you look carefully, he's standing next to him is a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And so he dwarfs the T-Rex with the size of this animal. And then those fossils they took out of the park are now on display here alongside of the replica. But, those things would be much too heavy to mount with an armature. So shared with the public, but still belonging kind of on loan from the park and property of the American public. So now I'd like to kind of shift into those last few topics of interesting items, I think, from the park. We sometimes get some unusual preservation. We see dinosaur skin on the right. That's very rarely preserved, but we do get a little bit of that in the park. And then dinosaur eggshells on the left with a needle there for scale. We don't find whole eggs, but in fact, so to find these things, you kind of have to lay on your belly in the desert and hunt and pick the things up with tweezers almost. But they're definitely dinosaur eggshells. This is something that we just discovered this year, the first dinosaur footprint from the park. And this is actually from the Rio Grande Wild and Scenic River, so it's not in the Big Bend National Park, but it's just downstream. It's very hard to get to, but it's a wonderful river trip. It takes you about a week to paddle downstream and see this. But hopefully you can see in my slide a three-toed theropod, like a tyrannosaur, footprint preserved in the limestone. And so this was reported by river guides. And I went down and verified it just earlier this year. We think that this is an outcrop of Glen Rose limestone, and so you've probably heard of the Glen Rose. It's famous in central Texas for its big trackways. Dinosaur Valley State Park is the same formation. Extends into the Big Bend, but we don't get the big outcrops of it in the national park. It's usually just at the very bottom of the stack of carbonates. So here was a spot where luckily enough of it was exposed that we could spot a trackway. What you'll see in the national park is this thing on the lower left, and that is actually a giant clam. And it had the clamshell has these big undulations in it, and if three of them sort of get preserved, it really looks like a three-toed footprint. But when you get down and really look at it, it is a clamshell. It's not a footprint, so it's a pseudo-track. Impressive fossils attract impressive scientists. And so this gentleman is Barnum Brown. And in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the big dinosaur collecting time for the big Eastern museums would send out expeditions. And Barnum Brown was one of the giants of paleontology. He's the guy that named Tyrannosaurus Rex, found the first one and named it. He did amazing work. He was working for the American Museum of Natural History out of New York. And they say that in the basement of the American Museum, there's still crates of fossils collected by Barnum Brown that have never been opened and examined. He collected so much material and left such a legacy that they haven't even gotten to it yet. So he came to Big Bend with R.T. Bird was his compadre. And actually, their last trip to the field as older men in 1921 was to what's now Big Bend National Park. So the park wasn't established until 1944, but they drove that old Ford delivery wagon around places you would not take a four-wheel drive today. And Barnum Brown, interestingly, he never learned to drive, so R.T. Bird, his assistant, did all the driving, and when they got stuck, then Brown had to get out and help push the truck out of the sand. But they took great photos of their excavations. And so all of these are from the park. That's at the museum, but that's a fossil they collected at the park, Dinosuchus, we've seen that. This is something they did, this is from the park also, and so they needed a way to transport these heavy bones. They're old guys. And so they took an old car door and they found something and some pipes, and they kind of put together a wheelbarrow to move their bones out. And because of the great photos they took, we've been able to go back and find some of their quarry sites. And usually next to the quarry site, there's a campsite. And so now, this is almost 100 years since they were here. These are historic sites. So we have a historic site superimposed on an important fossil site. And I've been to some of these sites, and it's really exciting. You can kind of see the little windbreak that they built out of rocks, and oh, there it is in the picture, and there's the hill behind it. And they even find their trash piles sometimes, some of the stuff they tossed aside. And so these are artifacts from 100 years ago. And on the top, that's either toothpaste or a shaving cream, some kind of stuff we found along with their tin cans. And then in the lower part is another one of these homemade tools out of a car part, and it was a chisel. And they obviously broke their chisel as they were working the rock and just threw it down in the excavation. And then 100 years later, I went out there with my colleague and we found it. And so now these are in the park collection as part of the Barnum Brown evidence. At another spot, another researcher found what we're confident is Barnum Brown's pickaxe with a broken handle. It was kind of almost like a burial. Whoever left it, we think Barnum Brown, set it down and then put dinosaur bones around it and then walked off and left it. And then 80 years later, a paleontologist found it and turned it into us. So we have that in the collection as well. We have a lot of petrified wood in the park. This whole hill is a big log. In fact, the hill is here because of the petrified wood. It's harder than the soft sediment that it's sitting on, so it armors the top of the hill, protects it from erosion. The other sediment wears away, and so there's a part of Tornillo Flat as you drive through, and all of the little hills out there have a big log of this material. This is all the same species of wood in this slide. So here's kind of a close-up of it, and here's a super close-up showing some of the preservation. That's a thin section, and you can see the cell structure in some of our petrified wood better than you can in a fresh piece of wood that you slice through. So just exquisite preservation in some cases, and tremendous diversity of wood in the park. So another unusual feature in the park are true petrified forests. We're seeing here a stump. You see its roots going down. This is in growth position here. And there are, I believe, 14 stumps in this little, in the vicinity of this. So we can come out and actually measure the distance between the trees. We get an idea of the size of the tree by looking at the diameter of the stump. And we're really starting to put together a picture of the world that the dinosaurs lived in that were wandering around under these trees, kind of the density of the forest, and really starting to flesh out our image of what the life was like back then. This guy is Steve Wick. He's the guy that went out with me to Barnum Brown sites, and I'll mention him a little later. He's gone on to other things, but he's a great paleontologist. Some more really nice preservation, and again, the interaction of life back then. This is a fossil leaf, but all these little dots are insect damage. And so again, we're putting that picture together of things were happening back then. These aren't just curiosities. This is evidence of life in the past. This is, so important fossils are still being found in the present. Barnum Brown and those guys didn't get everything. And so this is a species new to science that was just discovered in 2013 by that guy Steve Wick that I just showed you a picture of. And this is much bigger than the Chasmosaurus. This is from the very late Cretaceous. Brand new species. Steve, here it is in our mural. And so this fossil, the only place you can see it anywhere in the world is at the Fossil Discovery exhibit. We have this skull on display. Steve named it Bravoceratops for the genus name, named after, that's what the Mexicans call the Rio Grande, the Rio Bravo on the Mexican side. And then, interestingly, if you look up here, do you see a little bone kind of in the center? So the species name is Polyphemus. And Polyphemus was an ancient cyclops from mythology. And so that little bone is where got the Bravoceratops polyphemus. And then finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about Koalas. It was discovered by this guy in the lower left, Doug Lawson, in 1971. He was a grad student at UT, wandering around in the Dawson Creek area, kind of on the way western side of the park. And he found this curious bone, this one here. He was studying under a really good paleontologist named Juan Langston. And they couldn't figure out what it was for a long time. But some of the other bones that they found at the site were some of the long bones, and they were hollow inside. And that clue, kind of the light bulb went off, and it's like, oh, this is a pterosaur, a pterodactyl, a flying reptile. But what had thrown them off was the size of this thing. And so they went back out and put together, collected as much as they could of the big specimen was the big wing. And so this bone here fits in right there. And so as they continued to study in a completely separate part of the park, they found Pterosaur Ridge, which had a bunch of pterosaurs, but they were smaller specimens. They may have only been 10 or 20 feet of wingspan, which is still pretty big, but they were much more complete. So part of paleontology, part of it's science, and part of it is art, because they were able, because he found this complete bone, they were able to scale up the smaller specimens using this bone for scale to fill out the entire skeleton. And so the skeletons that you see here in this museum and other museums all over the world are replicas. But if you look at it carefully, and this is the case here too, these actually look like fossils. They're all kind of eroded and funky looking. And it's our way of showing you what the original material was that was found that makes up this big wing. The rest of these they'll be painted pretty, but they're pretty smooth. Excuse me, they're smooth, and they don't look like the original fossil. So that's just kind of an inside tip for you as you look at these things and admire them. And you can see it took a lot of work to chip these things out of the rock. So that's fossils in Big Bend. It's a lot of great things to see there. Come for the geology, come for the fossils. There's lots of other fun things to do in the park. Go hiking, go boating, camping, bicycling, and come see us and have a great time.
Wow. I think this is fascinating. I was talking to some of my colleagues the other day about the historical aspect of this study, and Don and his colleagues have preserved and reconstructed snapshots in time from millions of years ago, and they're a real resource, and I'm so glad that he's sharing it with us. I'm sure you have questions. Why don't you speak as loudly as you can, and if we need to repeat a question before Don answers it, we'll do so.
Go ahead. Several specimens of Deinosuchus have been found. Nothing recent has turned up, though. And by recent, I mean like within the last 5 years. The big skull that you see here was part of, they had hoped to recreate the entire skeleton. That animal would have been almost 40 feet long. And they ended up just kind of realizing that was too big a bite to bite off, and stayed with the skull. So if you'll come out and look at it, the detail is amazing on that. When a crocodilian loses a tooth, a new one comes up, and so in the jaw of the specimen that we have out there, you can see where it lost a tooth, and you see the new one peeking up out of its jaw. So it's a very nice piece of work. The question was about the tsunami deposits from the meteor impact at Chicxulub. It is very new research. It's not been published yet. It's just hints of deposits that they suspect perhaps are tsunami deposits. So they're digging in, trying to figure that out now. And so we're hopeful that that will be the case, and will open up a whole other branch of research, and will kind of confirm a lot of things. As I said earlier, Big Bend is important because it is continental deposits that are close to the impact site, whereas most other outcrops are from marine. The fossil discovery exhibit is, so the question was asking about how, if you're not very mobile, what can you see? And so the fossil discovery exhibit is completely accessible. In fact, we do something called programmatic accessibility, where we have tactile items like the bronzes that people that have vision impairment can interact with. We have other tactile things for things that are behind glass. It is completely accessible for mobility. We've paid a lot of attention to things like colors for people with color blindness, and font size for clarity for people who have partial vision, and even for people who don't speak English. We've designed it so that if you just look at the pictures, you'll get the idea of the story that we're telling. So hopefully it's good for lots of people to come visit. Other places in the park, we have a paved road system that is probably over at least 100 miles of road within the park that is paved and accessible to all vehicles, and then lots of dirt roads for people that want a little more challenging experience. So what wiped out the dinosaurs? And there's plenty of debate on that. Part of the belief is the meteor impact threw so much stuff into the atmosphere that there's sort of like a nuclear winter that killed off plant life, and the large animals had problems surviving. Now there's a competing opinion that something else might have had an impact on the dinosaurs, because in the late Cretaceous you have tremendous volcanic activity over in India, the Deccan Traps. It covered thousands of square miles with lava pumping. It's nothing at all like that today is in our volcanic activity. So pumping lots of greenhouse gases into the air, perhaps changing climate, and happening about the same time as the big extinction event. So were the dinosaurs kind of on their heels at that time? And the meteor was kind of the coup de grace that really wiped them out? Was there a connection between the meteor impact and volcanic activity on the other side of the world? Geophysicists can debate me on that one. I'm not even going to try to go there, but there's lots of possible ideas to try to explain. There's a lot going on for that extinction. And interestingly, for the big Permian extinction, which was even worse than the Cretaceous extinction, where in the Permian 90% of species died out, there were big volcanic activities in Siberia, the Siberian traps covering thousands of square miles in lava. So those things sure seem to be tied somehow to these big extinction events. But it's one of those things where over years you debate it and argue. Is what I love about geology, is having those debates. Yes?
Do we have any idea why the dinosaurs were so large?
The question is, any idea why the dinosaurs were so large? There seems to be some evidence that the climate did not have the extremes that kind of our modern climate does, and so it didn't matter what your gestation period was. And they're reptiles, so reptiles just tend to grow and grow and grow. I'm not enough of a paleontologist to really go into the weeds on that. My job in the park, I kind of have to be a generalist. And you've seen the geology is tremendously diverse, and so I need to kind of be able to do a little bit of everything, and can't really specialize totally. Yes, the National Park Service has a very good website. Each park has its own website, and we have somebody on staff who populates our website. So I would go to that. It's probably nps.gov/ B-I-B-E, like the first two letters of big, first two letters of bend. And that should take you right to it and tell you everything you need to know. And if you want to give us a call, we'll send a park newspaper to you that has a listing of the local hotels and eating places and outfitters that'll do guided trips for you and that sort of thing. Tell you about the campgrounds. So lots of info on the web. And I would put in a plug for our fossil discovery exhibit, fossildiscoveryexhibit.com. And I know that a lot of the HGS folks probably saw talks by my two interns from last summer who came out and populated that website in preparation for our grand opening. So thanks to the HGS for funding that. They did a great job. So check out fossildiscoveryexhibit.com. Yes?
You still need to wander around the old Mariscal cinnabar works?
Absolutely. One of the so the question was asking if we can still go in and wander around the old Mariscal Mountain cinnabar works. And one of the cool things about Big Bend, with all this volcanic activity and diverse geology, we get some interesting mineral deposits, including cinnabar and other mercury ores. And so the Terlingua area was a mercury mining area, very important in the U.S., especially during the World Wars. And in the park, there were cinnabar deposits as well, and a big mining complex and I guess it's called smelting. They heat the ore, the mercury comes off as a vapor, then they condense it out as a liquid. They put it kind of in a big metal flask and put it on a mule-drawn wagon and haul it up to the railroad in Marathon. And so the men that worked on those mines and worked around the mercury heating area often died of mercury poisoning. But we have a National Register historic site, which is the old remains of those mines. And absolutely, you can go out there and explore those mines. You can't go into the mines, we've closed those, but you can explore the ruins around there and kind of imagine life out in the middle of the desert, working for $1 a day. And these mines had a profound effect on what we see today in the park because they used wood to fuel those furnaces. And we're in the desert, and there's not a lot of wood, so they scoured the countryside for wood. So what 100 years ago might have been a stream lined with trees, those trees got cut down to use for timbers in the mines and for wood for the furnaces. So that mining effect kind of was a lot wider than just on the side of the mine. It kind of contributed to the desert scene you see today. Other interesting mineral deposits, there's fluorite in the area. There's a lot of agates that are very interesting. And there, in Mexico, there was a mine for silver, zinc, and lead. And they didn't have a way to get it to market, so they built the ore tramway that went, I think, 30 miles from Mexico across the Rio Grande and 10 miles up into what's now the park. It looks kind of like a ski lift, but they load ore into this thing, and then they put that on mule-drawn wagons and haul it up the old ore road, which is now, you can drive in a four-wheel drive vehicle all the way up to the railroad in order to send it to the smelter. So a lot going on out of Big Bend. You need to come see it if you haven't already. Put it on your bucket list.
I got a question for you.
Yes?
Any Paleo-Indian sites in the park that you mentioned near those Chalcedony deposits?
Up there at the Chalcedony deposits, we have found, so the question is about Paleo-Indian, kind of the oldest Indians, American Indians that we know of in North America. So these were people that were hunting Ice Age animals. They're hunting the mammoths and the mastodons and the giant ground sloths and things. So we call them Paleo-Indians. And we have several Paleo-Indian sites. We have artifacts made from that Chalcedony deposit. So we know that even back 15,000 years ago, they found that material and they were using it to make their spear points. And we have Paleo-Indian sites in the park, but I don't know of any sites up on that outcrop that we've found yet. When you come through the park at Persimmon Gap, like coming down from Marathon, you pass right by a Paleo-Indian site. That pass through this big mountain range was used by Paleo-Indians. The Comanche Trail in historic times came through that pass, and we come through it today. It's just the effect of geology. It's the easy way to cross the mountains, so humans used it over 15,000 years. Up in the basin, kind of right under our visitor center, we found an archaeological site that was really fascinating. They needed to put in a drain, and so kind of part of your job as an archaeologist to watch other people dig holes, make sure they don't find anything. And the backhoe, kind of went scoop, and boom, there was a stone-paved hearth. So the American Indians in the Big Bend would build a fire and pile rocks in it, and so they're getting the rocks hot, so they get kind of a constant heat source to cook their food with. And so you find a big circle of rocks, a meter in diameter, and they're all cracked. And so we stopped it, and then we dug the inlet for this drain. It was about 6 feet by 6 feet and about 6 feet deep. And so right under the pavement of the parking lot, we found metal belt buckles and stuff from the guys that were in CCC back in the day. And then a hearth a couple of hundred years old from an Indian site. And then as we dug down, they just got older and older. And we found we stopped at about 6 feet deep, and it was 9,000 years old, the deepest hearth we excavated. And so we took post hole digger and kept digging down to see if it went deeper. And so the deposit went even deeper. And so this is another basic rule of thumb for an archaeologist: is a good spot is a good spot. So this is where we built our hotel and restaurant today, because it's a nice, cool, scenic area for the American Indians. They had resources like acorns and pinon nuts up in the mountains, and so they'd come up and camp on that spot for thousands upon thousands of years, and now we park our cars right nearby.
I think maybe that's it.
Was there another question?
The little kid.
Did you have a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
How many dinosaur teeth have you found?
How many dinosaur teeth have I found? That's great. It's really exciting when you find a dinosaur, so I hope you'll come out and hunt around. And when you find one, take a picture of it. I've only found a few dinosaur teeth. I think a total of 3. But one was a tyrannosaur, which is really cool. And I found lots of shark's teeth. We have lots of shark's teeth in the park too. So that's another one that if you're in the right kind of rocks, you might find those. So in Petrified Wood, I bet that's something that you'd stumble across pretty easily out there. Okay.
Okay, I think we need to be done with questions. I would like to make an acknowledgement I would have made earlier. I would like to recognize the teachers and mentors of the student awardees tonight. They're not here, but carry that message back. Tell your teachers that we really appreciate what they do. And I would like to appreciate your service publicly, your public service. I know that government institutions are under siege. The Park Service is doing a great job, and you personally are obviously doing a great job on our behalf. Thank you so much. And Charles has a little token of our appreciation.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. It's a Chasmosaur. Chasmosaur, yeah. I don't see the little... well, no, that was Bravoceratops has that little thing. Chasmosaur doesn't.
So this is great. This is a Chasmosaur skull, like it's from the park. One of our fossils is a miniature. It's not full size, but it's beautiful. Thank you so much. That's great.
Okay, we're going to take a comfort break. The movie is scheduled to start at 10. Come back.